Good evening, America. 11 months ago, I inherited a mess, and I'm fixing it.
I see a drift by the forces of the right into a vocabulary of identity politics that comes from the left.
In 2025, more copies of the Holy Bible were sold in the United States than at any time in the last 100 years. Now, how about that? I don't like that he had a gun. I don't like that he had 2 fully loaded magazines. That's a lot of bad stuff. 1 year ago, our country was dead. We were absolutely dead. Our country was ready to fail, totally fail. Now, we're the hottest country anywhere in the world. Somalia is considered by many to be the worst country on earth. It's not even a country, okay? It barely has a government. I don't think it does. They're good at one thing, pirates. But they don't do that anymore. You know why? Because they get the same treatment from us as the drug dealers get. Boom, boom, boom.
Tim, welcome. Good to have you on. You started your essay in Inquirer at the weekend with Martha Kay, your Texan mother-in-law. And you wrote that she's been a conservative her entire life. She's a natural conservative. But Martha Kay is dismayed at Trump's ICE crackdown on illegal aliens. And this doesn't appear to be a kind of uncommon response from Republican types. So I want to ask, how is it that Trump is losing people like Martha Kay on the issue of law enforcement?
Nick, it's a great pleasure to be here. Yes, one should always be wary of quoting their mother-in-law. She's never been pro-Trump, but she kind of understood where Trump came from. She understood the kind of political, social, cultural need of a Trump-like figure. And this made her sympathetic, I think, to push back against the big state that he promised and in large part has presaged, but that he's gone too far. So I think she would be amongst those who saw a very porous border that she lives not but a few hundred kilometers from as a really big issue, but at the same time has spent her entire life working in a state, raising a family in a state where migration is basic to the society. Trump never, of course, promised to be a perfect conservative. He doesn't lead a conservative party. He's capable of straying well outside of an ambient conservatism and into territory that is beginning to make some conservatives, even those that were supporters of him, uncomfortable.
Somalia, which is barely a country, you know, they have no anything. They just run around killing each other. There's no structure. I don't want them in our country. Their country is no good for a reason. Their country stinks, and we don't want them in our country.
I am interested in borders and immigration to the extent that clearly this issue is a kind of a tenet of Trumpism in a way. So I'm keen to understand, what do you think, if he fails on this kind of big brand issue, what happens to his political credentials on this? I mean, is it surprising, actually, that we are talking about him losing political capital on such a core issue? I mean, what do you think it'll do to his appeal among American voters, not just the MAGA base? And do you think it could have a kind of broader impact on his legacy, I suppose?
I think there are two ways of answering it, Nick, short and long term. In the short term, the immediate challenge is the November midterms. And I wonder whether he has not set himself up for even more of a kicking through overreach on immigration. The long-term legacy question is, I think, to reflect on the nature of the multiracial, multicultural, even coalition that Trump has succeeded in building to this point. So I know a lot of the progressive Democratic narrative is that, well, this crackdown in Minneapolis and elsewhere reveals a kind of latent, implicit racism. I think almost exactly the opposite. So some of his greatest proponents, his biggest supporters of a stronger line on illegal immigration have been Hispanic Americans. Those who came here legally, joined the queue, and are thoroughly peed off with the 10 million or so that over the last few decades have entered illegally and have jumped the queue. Trump has been very popular with voters of color. He hasn't yet displaced the Democrats, but he's made important strides, I think, in chipping away at this very condescending, soft racism of the progressive left, that they own the votes of people of color. And he's done this not by running to the left. God, good Lord, we know he hasn't done that. He's done it by saying, you are welcome in this experiment. Come here legally. Democrats hate this because they want the state to be the daddy.
I don't like that he had a gun. I don't like that he has 2 fully loaded magazines. That's a lot of bad stuff.
So obviously the flashpoint for that at the moment is Minneapolis. And I just wonder the multi-ethnic support that you're talking about. When we see people like Stephen Miller and also Kristi Noem describing the deaths, the killing of Renee Good and Alex Preddy as them engaging in domestic terrorism, I mean, I just wonder what you think, and they've said that repeatedly, and I think you say in your piece, actually, that, we've got our own eyes and we can look at the excessive force used in those instances. I just wonder, what do you think that happens to multi-ethnic support when they see a president, or at least very senior people within the administration, trying not just to excuse, but I suppose to justify force of that violence of that kind?
I see an uncomfortable drift by the forces of the right into a vocabulary of identity politics that comes from the left. Mm-hmm. It's never struck me as a sensible and long-term project to simply replace a left-wing identity politics with a right-wing one. The project itself is predicated not on group rights or claims, let alone grievances. It's predicated on the notion that all men, and but therefore by implication, all people are created equal. Stephen Miller is in some ways captures the whole ideological emphasis of the approach. They've started playing the left-wing game of calling out, describing not the actors not simply as individuals or as criminals, but as representatives of their gender or representatives of their race. And I think this is the end of American constitutionalism.
He's Hitler. And then they say he's a Nazi. I'm not a Nazi.
I think that we have to stop getting so offended at every little thing in the United States of America.
And I signed an order making it the official policy of the United States government that there are only 2 genders, male and female.
As an observer, what do you make of that then? If you have a right that is constantly borrowing the language of their progressive opponents, isn't that just a reflection that there is no MAGA core, that it's all a kind of dynamic force of impulses that can't really be hewn together properly? I mean, is that how people should think about it? Is that how people should think about what Miller is talking about here?
So the fact they're having to play by progressive rules is indicative, I think, of how far the left control the vocabulary of the discourse. The transgressive thrill some of the MAGA right get from breaking the rules, from being transgressive, doesn't elevate the discourse any. You end up in a worse form of ideological combat where you're just exchanging different notions of identitarianism. Their principal position should be one that's grounded in American constitutional principles. They're not setting themselves onto the path of national re-electability. They are, again, seeking short-term advantage by stoking these protests. People like Martha Kay, to bring my wonderful mother-in-law back into it, they want an alternative, and they want both sides to offer a more viable, lasting alternative.
Donald Trump sucks dick. Donald Trump
what we're seeing in Minneapolis is a kind of limit, a natural limit that Trump has reached at home. And yet abroad, what he's found is that he can attack almost with impunity. This is something that's common to many American presidents. Their ego and their experience demands a larger platform. And in any second term, that platform is the world. And Trump is a very good example, I think, of that.
Given the recent history of presidents and their second term, do you think it would be wise to assume that there's going to be decline?
I don't think he can, would be my observation, which is informed both by history, which is a very good guide to, not certain, but the best guide we've got to where we are and where we're going, but also the nature of the US Constitution, which, despite the fears of progressives, he has not overthrown, nor come close to overthrowing. The Constitution, and has done since the early 1950s, limited all presidents to 2 terms. Donald Trump, despite his deal making, I'm not sure he's been able to make a deal with Lord Almighty to preserve him in pristine health forever. So I wonder whether political reality and physical, biological reality won't increasingly come to mark the next, less than 36 months of his second term.
I suppose the funny thing with Trump, though, is, Tim, that, so many commentators will say he knows nothing about history, that he couldn't care less about what happened in the past. It's immaterial to him. But at the same time, as I think you've indicated before, he's deeply saturated in history and has a kind of instinctive sense of how it impacts events and kind of where he sits in it.
Trump is not interested in history, but history is very interested in Donald Trump. And that's why I think he's become, that's a recycled Leninist maxim. But I think we exaggerate the fact that we exaggerate Trump's historical illiteracy. I don't think he's deep in big fat history books. But I suppose just as an aside, the legacy of any president is mostly determined, 50, 100 years hence, by what mostly progressive historians and political scientists say about them. So he's going to struggle for a long time to come out well from the accounting he'll get there. He is driven, I think, by a simple understanding of history as victory falling to the strong. This is peak Trump. This is a man who recognizes he's time limited. He's got a shelf life and he can see the clock ticking down. He went hard in that first year because he knows political power, physical power, cognitive strength will all start to dissipate.
Timothy J. Lynch, thank you very much.
Thank you, Nick. Great pleasure.